Hello, everyone. Um, just felt like it was time to make this video. I've been putting it off for a long time now. Had it on my heart for a while to share with you my experience with God and the frequency of the universe. So, at the encouragement of my friend, and also since I have been starting back on my yoga journey and also researching a bit into physics, I have really felt the need to go ahead and share this with you all, with whoever may be listening. I just hope it can help somebody. Um, so, to start, well, for me, the story basically begins when I met my late husband. Um, it was back in 2004, and I was following him to his house before we were even dating, and he was driving his Explorer, and he sticks his hand out the window and he holds up his fingers 1, 4, 3, 4. And so whenever we get to the school the next day, I didn't think anything about it whenever I'd gotten to his parents' house. And I had asked him, I said, what did that mean? Like, what were you doing with your fingers? And he said, 1, 4, 3, 4, I love you more. And so that was our thing. We would squeeze each other's hand like 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other one would like squeeze hard and be like, and then squeeze back. So we were very happy. I mean, every couple has their hard times, but he was wonderful. He was an absolutely phenomenal human being. And I remember one of my friends on the Bloodmobile, he told me, Nathan, my husband, had lived through a lot of hard things with his health. He 3 years old, they found out he had kidney issues, and he had dealt with hospitals and doctor's appointments and surgeries ever since. And it just made him wise beyond his years to appreciate what's important in life. And so, skipping ahead, we got married in 04. We met in 04. We got married in 2007. We had our son in 2011. And then in 2014, he got his second kidney transplant. My husband did. He had one kidney transplant when he was 16 before I ever met him. And so throughout our relationship, I always worried about losing him. I knew going into things that we probably wouldn't have the normal life expectancy that most couples have, as far as he only planned to live to be about 60 years old, just realistically, with how long kidney transplants last and all the anti-rejection drugs and effects of those on his health. So I was always doing whatever I could as far as like cooking healthy and limiting things from our diet and making sure he took his meds, to the point I'm sure I probably drove him crazy. And he loved me anyway. But I would nag at him, like, did you take your meds today? And so skipping ahead, after he had the second kidney transplant, that was in 2014, and we had been spending time with his aunt, we'll call her Dee, and her son Treasure, and her daughter Miss Des. And so, changing their names, of course, for the video, but her daughter was 11 and her son was 13 at the time, and she had lived a pretty rough lifestyle, but trying to get back on track, and Nathan really wanted to help her. And so we got to be really close to them in that short amount of time. And I remember whenever he had his second kidney transplant, something in me just told me, this will be our last summer with these kids. We had kind of been getting to know him the previous summer, and then this was May when he had the transplant going into summer. And I figured it was because they were probably going to move. And it never occurred to me that it would be Nathan's last summer on earth. And so we made sure to do a lot with them. I remember we took them to Dollywood. The the daughter and the son with our son Noah. He was 3 at the time, and we just we did a lot of family things. But at the same time, I know Nathan was spending more and more time in bed. He wasn't feeling well, and I didn't realize it at the time, but Dee told me later when he got sick that she thought that he had been depressed a while. And I remember thinking, he's ready to go. He's just, he's hanging on for us, and I didn't want to acknowledge that. And Nathan and I, like, we were kind of sci-fi nerds. We watched a lot of Fringe. I remember it was a crazy, like, a gift and a curse. I got the stomach virus and then he got it, and we were laid up in bed for like 2 days straight. And my mom and his mom took turns watching Noah, and we just binge watched like the first 3 seasons of Fringe. And we watched a lot of Doctor Who, and I remember listening to a John Eldridge CD. We had picked it up at McKay's on the way getting ready to go down to Panama City for the first time. And this John Eldridge CD, he was talking about how every story is a reflection of the great story. Every good story, that is, reflects, there's perfect garden, everything is good, and then there's trouble in the garden, and then we need a hero to step in and save us, and then the hero comes and saves the day. And I think a lot of people want to look at God as if he's either this angry, vengeful God dealing out punishment on a throne, or he's some kind of wish granting Santa Claus. And I don't think it's like that. I think, not to say like Doctor Who's totally a not religious show at all, but it's not meant to be. But there's still that example, the Doctor, he steps in and he tries to save humanity, and a lot of them either don't want him there because there's trouble that comes along with that. When he's there, things are just good versus evil, and there's a lot of tension. And then whenever he rescues humanity, it's like people forget that he was even there at all, or they don't want to acknowledge, or they want to just move on and forget. And I think a lot of our society is the same way, but I won't get into that in this video. So back to the frequency of the universe. So when Nathan was sick, and I was trying everything within my power to try to make him better or try to prolong his life, and just whatever I could do. I remember being really depressed, and my mom had mentioned something she had heard on the radio about some kind of sound therapy, and I had looked it up. It was maybe 45 minutes away from us, but I'm not big on going to doctors, and I'm definitely not big on paying money and traveling whenever I can deal with things on my own. And so I just started looking things up on the internet, and I had researched the sound waves, and it led me to solfeggio frequencies. And the solfeggio frequencies, from there I just researched more about healing sounds, and I discovered the Dr. Royal Rife and his Rife machine. And I thought that was really interesting because we had a friend who's a home vet, and he had mentioned to us a while before that there's a quantum physics-based machine that they could hook up to animals, and because animals aren't able to tell you what's wrong with them, that they could use this machine to, one, tune in to what was going on with the animal, and then also adjust the vibrations, the frequency, the energy, to help possibly correct what was going wrong with this animal. And they believe that the same technology could be applied to humans. And so that really had me interested. Like, if there was anything that could help Nathan and his kidneys, like, I wanted to know. I was researching anything from the artificial organ transplants, as far as bioengineered organs, Dr. Anthony Atala and his bioprinting, the bladder, that anything that would maybe be of potential use to my husband. And I just, time went on, and just the day-to-day living life. And after his second kidney transplant, I remember he wasn't as healthy as we had thought he was going to be. Like, there were complications that went along with it, and he actually ended up in the hospital for about a week, and he had some blood loss in the stool, and they couldn't figure out where that was coming from. They did the upper GI and the lower GI, and after about a week in the hospital, still no results, but the IV fluids had him feeling better, and the insurance is limited, and so they sent him home. And he felt better. It was like having my husband back. He felt so much more like himself, instead of just wanting to lay in the bed and not have the energy to get up and spend time with us. And so he wanted to take his aunt to a haunted house, and so we had decided, it was right before Halloween, I would watch Miss Des and Noah here at our house, and then he would take her to the haunted house, and then he was supposed to bring her back, or maybe take her to her house, I don't remember, and we were supposed to get Miss Des back to her the next day. Well, I remember sitting there telling him before he left, like, hey, why don't we just take tomorrow and take it easy and not go out? Like, let's just, just spend the day relaxing. And he was like, no, we've made this commitment. We're going to go ahead and follow through with it. And it's like, okay, he's always Superman. He always looked out for everybody else, and just didn't want to admit there was anything the matter with him. And he was that example in my life and in so many other people's lives, of that never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And at the time, I was a jealous kind of person, and sometimes I would get aggravated, even like, grown and married guy friends, like, wanting his time, just like, I wanted him home with us more. And I guess I know I was way overly jealous and clingy and controlling, to the point of I didn't want him expending energy that he could be spending with us, and that was wrong of me. But I also didn't comprehend at the time that, yes, everybody loved him, because, yes, he was an example of love that a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to meet in their lives, or there's very few people like he was. So back to the frequencies. October 25th was the night that Nathan took his aunt to the haunted house. And I remember the last thing before he left, they were getting in, I think it was in her vehicle, to take him, or they were getting in her vehicle, and he was going to drive. And I remember he had his med pack with the insulin and everything that he was supposed to take with him, and I'd always fuss at him, did you check your sugar? And so I was hollering out the door to him, like, did you get your insulin? He's like, babe, you worry too much. And so they left and they went on, and as I remember, I was watching Good Burger with Miss Des and our son Noah, and I get a phone call. Nathan had already called me to tell me that they had gone to the haunted house and everything was good and that they were going to get a bite to eat and then they'd be headed back to the house. And then I get a call and it's Dee, and she's at a Waffle House and she's hysterical and asking what kind of meds he takes. And I'm thinking that she's messing with me, saying that he's not breathing. And I'm thinking it's some kind of sick joke. And I'm realizing as she's talking and he's not getting on the phone that he would not let her worry me like that. And something is wrong because he's not stopping her. And then the paramedics get on the phone and ask if he's on any kind of drugs. And I tell them about the kidney transplant. And I throw the remote across the room. And I remember hanging up and thinking, if he's still at a Waffle House, hopefully it's 30 minutes from our house to there, he's not still going to be there. And so I'd called my mom and dad for them to come and get Noah. And I'm in the hallway with Miss Des and Noah, and I'm praying to God, please don't let me lose my husband. And it comes to mind, my friend Haley, her and her husband at the time worked on the ambulance service, or helped with it, she did. And they're in Cleveland, and I happened to get her, like on the first or second ring, she picks up the phone, and I'm telling her what's going on, and they're on their way. They meet the ambulance there at the Waffle House. And she tells me they're going to take him to the local hospital, which is not the best hospital to take someone who's got serious issues. But so my dad's like, you're in no condition to drive. And so he takes Noah up to my mom and takes me and Miss Des to the hospital to meet her mom at the hospital. And I remember we're at this light and we're just waiting for it to change. And my dad, he finally gets so frustrated, he just runs the light. It's dark, there's nothing coming. He just left turns and runs the red light. And I remember running through the parking lot, dropping his clothes. And I have his clothes because I'm thinking he's going to be fine. I'm thinking he's just another hospital visit because he's always fine. And I remember getting to the hospital and they wouldn't let me back to see him. I remember signing papers. I remember seeing people that I knew as customers from where I worked. And Dean gets Destiny and drives her, and my dad takes me to the hospital, the better hospital, about 30 minutes away from there that they're taking Nathan to. And I remember meeting Haley and her husband at the time, and them just telling me, I remember hypoxic anemia. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically a lack of oxygen to the brain. And his blood volume had been so low, and they think that's what had caused it. Never really got definite answers on that, but I remember going into the ICU, not even the ICU, no, it was the ER, and he's on a stretcher in the ER, and they've got his clothes over in the corner, and I'm holding his hand, and I don't remember if I took off his ring or if they had already taken it off and given it to me. But I've got my wedding band and his wedding band at the time, like mine on my left and then his on my right, because his fingers were bigger than mine. And I remember I'm squeezing his hand, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he's not squeezing back. And I know something is really wrong. And a few hours later, they get him up to the ICU floor. And I remember Haley and his dad, and there might have been some other people there with us. But the nurse shining the light, and his people's not responding. And it's like that moment in Doctor Who, the prisoner Zero has escaped, where there's an extra door, and you don't want to see the door because your brain doesn't want to comprehend and process what's behind the door. I've worked in medical before, and I knew that look. Like that, it's bad. It's hopeless look. And I didn't want to see it. And so that was October 25th. We'll fast forward to Halloween. We were supposed to spend Halloween with his cousins, and they were going through a really hard time, just like we all were. And this was back before COVID, whenever you could stay the night overnight in the waiting room. You could have multiple visitors. You could only supposed to have 2 at a time into the ICU, but they made exceptions for us. I remember his Aunt Dee coming, and she didn't have Treasure with her, and she stayed with me for a little bit, and we decided to go back and get him 30 minutes away. She drives me, and it's snowing. It is dark, and it is cold, and it's snowing. It does not snow in October here. We live in the South, and it does not snow in October. And just watching these flakes fall, and it just feels surreal. And so we get him, and we get back to the hospital. And I remember being in the ICU waiting room. It was a couple of floors down, the ground level, and he was on the 3rd floor, Nathan was. And I remember trying to sleep, Dee's snoring, Treasure's asleep, and I can't sleep. And I remember looking at my phone and seeing it's nearly 4 in the morning. And I remember we used to watch comedy, Nathan and I did. He wanted to keep us laughing, and so we watched a lot of comedy. And I remember a skit that a comedian had done about 4 in the morning. Everything big happens at 4 in the morning. And I just had this feeling like I wanted so bad for, Dia de los Muertos, November the 2nd, or Halloween. Like we had painted masks with the kids, and I had brought mine to the hospital that night of the candy skull Dia de los Muertos mask, just thinking, he's already died once and been revived, because Haley's husband said, "That's my brother." And those paramedics worked on him for 20 minutes to bring him back from the dead because he was not breathing. He had no heartbeat. And I'm just hoping for another miracle, because it was a miracle that it brought people together, family members that hadn't spoken. Like, I know I had really bad attitude toward his brother and his sister-in-law at the time, and I'm close with her now. And I just remember it was God that whenever they were in Japan and they flew all the way knowing that this was going on, and I remember not wanting to see them, but when I saw her in the cafeteria, I went over, and it wasn't me, but what spirit is in me that made me go up to her and hug her and be like, what, he loves you and he wants you here, and so do I. And from that moment that I said that, I meant that. And she was wonderful, like went out of her way for me. And there were so many things that went on while he was in the hospital, that there was so much love. So many people showed up, and it was like, people imagine like what it would be like to be there hearing their own eulogy. Well, he got to be there. He was in a coma and he couldn't respond, but he got to listen to all the kind words that people were telling him, how much he had meant to them, how much they needed him, and how much he had just made a difference in their lives. And that's something not many people get. And I remember being in the waiting room and thinking that 4 in the morning, maybe something's great going to happen at 4 in the morning. And that flashed through my mind, him holding his hand out the window, the 1, 4, 3, 4, I love you more. And I remember just that song. I think it's Matthew W. Smith. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But there is a song called More, and it was on Christian radio, and it's I love you more than the sun and the stars that I taught how to shine. You are mine and you shine for me too. I love you yesterday and today and tomorrow. I'll say it again and again. I love you more. And I know I can't sing, sorry, but that song was going through my mind. And backtracking, whenever he was sick, I was I was depressed. I was looking up anything that would make him well, anything that might stand a chance. And the frequencies, like seeing Fringe, how they could use the sound waves to either heal or destroy, and to see just so much, the energy, the frequency, the vibration of the universe, and how that can be used for healing. And I remember just feeling like I had to move, like I had to get out of that waiting room. So I'm trying to wake up Treasure, and he doesn't feel like getting up, and Dee's snoring, and I told him, I'm going upstairs, I've got to go. And there was this bridge that I had been sleeping on. It was indoor, it was glassed in, and it connected the third floor where the ICU was of the hospital to the rehab hospital. And it was heated, and it was very dimly lit. You could see where people were being brought in the ambulance down below. And I remember I would go up there and sleep some, because they had the TV on the uh, like Dateline type of shows. You know, everything was going good, and then dum dum dum, they come up missing, and who's the killer kind of things. And I remember right before Nathan collapsed, we were over at his Aunt Dee's, and she had a show on that was like that. And he told her, don't be watching stuff like that. You don't need that in your house. And I remember her saying, but it's a true story. It's things that really happen. He's like, I don't care. You don't need to let that into your house and into your mind. And I just kept that with me. And whenever he was in his coma, it was like he would react to certain, like, people talking to him. His heart rate would go up. I remember I had video recorded Noah, our son, on my phone, and I played that, and his heart rate, like, racing when he heard Noah's voice. So I know he was there. I know. And Haley and her husband at the time, they both said, you know, this is different. We've seen people that have been in a vegetative state, and it's like they were out of this world, but the state that he was in, it was different. Like, you could tell that he was aware of things going on around him. And so I became very protective of what was on the television. Like, I would only put it on Food Network or the weather station, because I didn't want anything with a dark energy to be playing in his subconscious, especially whenever we weren't able to be there with him. And so anyway, back to the bridge. I'm I'm trying to get up there, and I'm I have to move. Like, I had to get out of there and get up to the third floor. And I remember the elevator, you're supposed to walk down the hallway on the first floor and take the elevator up to the ICU. Well, there's an elevator that takes you right at the entrance exit to the ICU waiting room. And I'm I'm just moving. I'm getting in that elevator. That very first elevator I come to, I take it up, and it lets me out at the children's section. And there's the Ronald McDonald, not the Ronald McDonald house, but the Ronald McDonald room, where I was able to come and get showered and have snacks, and just a place to sit down on a couch and feel like something was a little bit normal while you're stuck in the hospital. And I remember being thankful and grateful that that was there, and just this overwhelming sense of, concern and just heartache for these families that they have little kids that are going through things like this. And I remember praying for the kids, like walking past the tiles where they had put the drawings that the kids had done on the ceiling, and walking past these rooms and just praying for these families that I don't know. And I remember going to the bridge and like passing the ICU and thinking about these people. And so I'm on the bridge, through the doors, walking, pacing the bridge, and I'm like, okay, God, I'm here. What do I do? Where do I go from here? And so I'm walking back and forth, and I feel the warmth of the heater radiating down. And so I'm like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, left or right? Well, I pick right, and I'm facing the ICU, and my back is to the rehabilitation center behind me. And so I sit down, but I turn so that I'm facing the rehabilitation center. And there's these green handrails that run along the bridge. And I've got my wedding band and his wedding band on my hands. And so I'm sitting down, and like the rail's up here, but my rings hit the rail as I reach up overhead. And it just, the frequencies went through my mind. And so I don't know, it was God, I guess, that gave me the idea. I start tapping out 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the rails, and I hear it start to ring. And so then I'm tapping it out, just like 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm doing this, and sometime, I don't know how long I had been there, but Dee comes up and finds me, and she's like, what are you doing? And at this point, any sane person would have thought I was having a nervous breakdown or just mentally coming unglued and taken me home. But God knew that she was who I needed at that time, because she had been to psychiatric institutions in the past, and she sat right there with me, and she starts tapping on the rails with me. And we're trying to keep it in sync, and I'm praying, God, we're tired and we're falling out of rhythm, and just help us. We're tired and we don't know what we're doing. And so it goes from 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 to iloveyoumore, and it gets faster and faster and faster, and the whole bridge is vibrating, like the whole thing. And no security guards are coming in this time that we're doing this. It's just me and her and God. And my mind, it's like I can see space open up, and I see all the stars just swirling into infinity. And it's like I hear God speak, I love you more. I'm bigger than any brokenness, any hurt that you might experience. I'm bigger than all of your hurt and all of your pain. And throughout all of the brokenness and all of the suffering, I love you more. More than you know, more than you can possibly even imagine. I love you more. And I'm still, as I'm seeing this, we're still, and my voice breaks like the shrieking kind of high pitch, and everything fades away. And she's like, what just happened? She said, I thought you were going to start speaking in tongues. I'm like, no, but I saw this vision. And I tell her, you know. And so the human part of me, it immediately wants to be like, maybe we can save him. Maybe we've been given something that can save Nathan. And so we go in there, we get Treasure, we go back up to the ICU. It's like now going on 5 a.m. probably. And they let us in. Those nice, wonderful nurses, they made the exception and let not 2, but 3 people in after visiting hours. And so I think they were at his hands and I was at his feet, and we were squeezing like 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we started chanting the iloveyoumore as we're squeezing that vibration into his circulation. I don't know. It made sense at the time. But I remember, I guess not, I don't think it was disappointment, but just like a waiting. Nothing happened. The doctors came in and checked him, and there was no changes. But the next day, I remember people had come to visit us, and I remember that the beds next to us, there were lots of people in the ICU. And I mean, during this time, he had lots of visitors. There was one night that we had a whole group and a guy that I didn't know, but my friend knew, that had a guitar. And I mean, that we were singing like praise and worship, and then just like the crop circles and sewing machines, you know, we were just surrounding him with love and good vibrations, you know. But there were so many people, the nurses were aware. There was so much love, and that he was a very special person. And the beds, they had these speakers on them. And I remember the bed next to his, the guy had left, and it kept putting out these noises, like these, like, just, I can't do it, like, but anyway, it was just like odd, you know, and I'm not doing it to serve it justice. But then the longer it goes on, I'm like, is that solfeggio frequencies? And so I asked the nurse, it was a male nurse, and I'm like, thinking I'm going crazy, like, are you hearing this? And he's like, yeah, I hear it. I said, is that solfeggio frequencies they're playing? He's like, I don't know. I've not heard of that. I'm not familiar with that. I'm like, okay. And so that was the only time that happened. But just the fact that it happened was kind of like a sign confirming this. I really experienced what I thought happened last night. And from there, Nathan didn't get the healing that I wanted, the healing for him to be made well and with us on earth. He ended up transferring to a different facility, and from that point, he deteriorated. And we met some really wonderful staff people, like from the respiratory therapist to the nurses, the dietitian, all the way down to the man working in the cafeteria would send me plates of food, like just making sure that we were taken care of. Like he made sure that the family, like people coming in, you know, that they didn't go without, and he didn't charge us for it. I mean, he knew what was going on, and he had been, I believe, a chef in the military, and he said that this was one reason that he didn't think he would stay in that job, because he saw too much pain and suffering and loss. And I'll make a different video for a different time of all the love that we experienced. So many people outreaching to us. But I keep remembering, before Nathan was sick, he was sick, but before he collapsed, Levi Lusko was on 60 Seconds of Hope on the radio. And I remember him talking about pain is a microphone. And when you are hurting, people are going to lean in and see how you respond. And there was so much hurt and so much suffering, but there was so much beauty. And I remember seeing graffiti. There was, I guess, a panda game. And I kept seeing that along the way. But I kept seeing these little Easter eggs. Nathan loved the Weeping Angels episode of Doctor Who. And like there were all kinds of just little Easter eggs along the way. And I remember one was graffiti on a building that wasn't there whenever we had passed by a couple of weeks ago. And it said, "You are loved." And I believe that. I believe that God sent that to me. I know that probably going to get this wrong. I'm wanting to say 432 hertz is the frequency which the universe actually does vibrate to. But I believe iloveyoumore was given to me by God as a way that my brain could comprehend that throughout all that was created, throughout everything in time and space, there's that frequency of love vibrating throughout the universe, and that we're part of that. I hope that this helps somebody. And there's another story I want to share, but that'll be for a different day. Namaste.